harder for me to do that congestion attack. It's still an open research question. How bad is this? What are the trade-offs? Where we're heading right now is, well, first of all, yes, the congestion attack does seem to work if you're sending a whole lot of traffic. So maybe we should do that rate limiting thing we were talking about. But second of all, I can just ping flood you if I pick the correct IP address. I don't have to actually send Tor traffic to you and back. I can just knock you off the network and see if this other guy stopped talking. So there are some out-of-band attacks that we don't have a good handle on either. And maybe the result is, well, that sucks that both of those attacks work, but why don't we at least work with what we've got and encourage people to all be relays. We'll find out in the next year or so. Hopefully we'll have a bit more understanding of these congestion attacks and whether we should solve them, whether we can solve them, what the trade-offs are. Okay, so that was the third one. The fourth one, the load balancing isn't right. So the goal for Tor is every relay estimates its own bandwidth and says, I think I can push 100 kilobytes a second, or I think I can push 500 kilobytes a second. And those numbers all get advertised in the directory, and then clients fetch it, and they choose paths. They weight their choices based on how many bytes each relay advertises. So if somebody advertises 500 kilobytes, they're 5 times more likely to be chosen in their path than somebody who advertises 100 kilobytes. And so Mike Perry has been doing some actual measurements to figure out how many bytes you're going to get from each given relay. So he ordered all of the relays by their advertised capacity, and he actually tried to make connections through all of them. And it turns out if you pick nodes from the top 5% of the relays, you're going to get 80 or 90 kilobytes a second. And if you pick from the rest, it falls off pretty quickly. So the first research question is, what should this graph look like? Should it really be flat? Should it sort of look like this but fall off slower? It probably shouldn't look this unbalanced, because at this point there are a lot of people up there in just the first couple of relays that are really fast and the rest of them are really slow. So the first result is self-measuring bandwidth, the way that relays do it right now. They look at what they've seen and they advertise a number. Not so good. It turns out to produce numbers that aren't as balanced as they should. We're not using the bandwidth that we have as efficiently as we should. We also had to cap the numbers that relays are advertising to 10 megabytes a second, because if you show up and you say, I can do a gigabyte per second of traffic, and we believe you, and clients actually start weighting their choices based on that, then you're going to end up seeing 70% of the circuits, because everybody's going to want to use you. Now that we're actively measuring, if we're actually testing every relay to figure out what it actually can provide, then we could. If you can push a gigabyte a second, we could let clients use you. The Tor network would get a lot faster. There would be a lot more traffic going over relays that could handle it. On the other hand, there's a huge anonymity problem there, because if some guy shows up with a gigabyte per second of traffic and we actually send that many clients to him, he's half the Tor network. We've got 1,800 relays, but one huge one over there is taking up half of the bandwidth. That's fast, but not safe. How do we get the right balance? What about one-hop paths? I talk to a lot of people who really want Tor to be fast, and they say, well, I want Tor to be fast for me, and I don't care about that anonymity stuff, so I just want to use one-hop. I just want to go from me to the exit relay and out. And, I mean, won't that be better for everybody? You'll be loading the network less, I'll get more speed. So once upon a time, when our load balancing was all the clients balance over the advertised bandwidth, the main reason for not doing this was you're going to screw up load balancing for everybody else. If clients load balance in different ways, then we're not going to be able to predict where the load will go, and we're not going to be able to build paths that are fast. So now that we're doing the active measurement stuff and we can actually tell which nodes are overloaded, then that's not so much of a problem. One-hop paths are clearly really bad for anonymity, because there's one place, and if the adversary happens to be watching it or running it, then they know Alice and Bob. Another problem, if exits are scarce, if let's imagine 90% of the users started doing this. So only about a third of those 1,800 relays are exit relays. They're the people who are willing to connect to websites and stuff like that. So if everybody starts clobbering those, then they're already only about a third of the network. It's not like you can all just start clobbering the exit relays and you'll get faster service. There's only a certain amount of bandwidth that can go around. So my theory, my claim, is Tor is not slow because we're using multiple hops. I mean, the speed of light is kind of slow, but Tor is slow because of all the bytes that are in the buffers queued up at every relay. And we need to figure out that. And at that point, the fact that you're hopping over several hops shouldn't actually hurt you that much. But the real reason why we don't want people doing one-hop exits is we don't want to increase the liability, increase the exposure of the exit nodes. Right now, because of Tor's design, there's no reason to go collect that exit relay. You're never going to learn who Alice is because there's always more than one hop. That exit relay is never going to be able to learn who Alice is. But if half of the users start using these things as one-hop proxies, then you might as well go find out. Go collect the computer. Maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe Alice was somebody who didn't care much about anonymity. So we don't want to do that to our exit relay operators and make it even more likely that somebody's going to go steal that computer. Okay, what else is there to think about? It's not just the high latency, it's also that long tail that you saw at the beginning. It's the high variability. So one of the problems we have is Tor does rate limiting. It was a pretty reasonable idea. The problem is, so the way it works is there's a token bucket, which is a basic CS design. The idea is every second we refill the bucket with a certain number of tokens, and each token represents the ability to send 1 byte onto the network. So if we have a token bucket with 30 kilobytes in it, then we're allowed to send 30 kilobytes worth of stuff, but once we've sent that, then we're not allowed to send any more until the next second arrives, and then we put 30 kilobytes more in, and then we can send those. So the problem is that we're refilling the token bucket every second. And that means what happens in practice is at the beginning of every second there's a spike, and then nothing, and then another spike and nothing. So every second, at the beginning of the second, we're sending everything we can send because we've got all this stuff queued up, and then we're silent for the rest of the second. So what happens from this is we end up with these bumps so this is a map of how long it takes to extend your circuit for each hop. So the first hop takes far less than a second, but the second hop, a lot of them are taking exactly 2 seconds, from when we start the request to when we get the answer for that second hop. And the third hop, a lot of them are taking exactly 3 seconds. And the problem for this is all the bytes are moving through the Tor network once a second. So you move, and then at the beginning of the next second, you get to move another hop. At the beginning of the next second, you can move another hop. So we're artificially adding 3 or 4 seconds of latency when we don't need to. And if we could figure out how to fill the token buckets throughout the second in an even way, then the bytes could move forward rather than having to wait and then move on at the beginning of the next second. And there are some trade-offs here because okay, I probably shouldn't go to that one yet. So there are some trade-offs here because there's IP overhead, TCP overhead, there's this MTU thing, OpenSSL has its TLS record overhead. So we can't just send 2 bytes out over each TCP connection every so often. We need to find some trade-off between sending enough that the overhead is worth it versus really dividing it up throughout the second. And then another thing to ponder, Tor circuit timeouts. So if I'm building a circuit through the Tor network, right now I have a fixed timeout of 60 seconds or something like that. And if I don't finish building the circuit in that 60-second period, then I throw it away. It's never going to finish. So